taste of copper and regret filled my mouth as consciousness crawled back like a wounded animal. My head felt like it had been used for target practice by a particularly vindictive asteroid miner, and the metallic deck plating beneath my cheek was warm with what I hoped was coolant fluid, but suspected was my own blood. I tried to piece together how I'd ended up sprawled across the cargo hold of what appeared to be my own ship. At least, the worn leather holster on my hip and the familiar ache in my lower back suggested this rust bucket belonged to me. But everything else? Gone. Wiped cleaner than a preacher's conscience. The ship hummed around me with the particular wheeze of an aging fusion drive, and through the porthole, I could see the amber glow of a gas giant's rings, spinning lazy as a saloon ceiling fan. Wherever I was, it wasn't anywhere I remembered being. I hauled myself upright, joints protesting like old hinges, and took stock. Standard cargo hauler, maybe 40 years old, with the kind of modifications that suggested either smuggling or paranoia, possibly both. Reinforced bulkheads, hidden compartments, and a gun rack that had seen better decades. My fingers found the pistol at my hip automatically, muscle memory intact, even if everything else had gone to hell. The weapon felt right in my hand. A classic plasma revolver, well-maintained, with custom grips worn smooth by years of use. I'd know this gun anywhere, even if I couldn't remember where anywhere was. But when I tried to recall drawing it, firing it, even holstering it for the first time, I came up empty as a broken fuel tank. That's when I noticed the name burned into the hull, plating near the airlock. Black Eleanor. The letters were fresh, still smoking slightly, as if someone had branded them there with a cutting torch while I was unconscious. Below the name, in smaller script, were coordinates that meant nothing to my addled brain. I stumbled toward the cockpit, hoping the nav computer might shed some light on my situation. The pilot's chair showed signs of recent violence, torn upholstery, bloodstains, and what looked like blast marks from energy weapons. My blood, most likely, though I couldn't find any corresponding wounds on my body. Just a dull ache behind my eyes that pulsed in time with the ship's reactor. The nav display showed we were drifting in the outer system of a star I didn't recognize, somewhere in what the charts labeled as the Broken Territories, that lawless stretch of space between the core worlds and the rim, where decent folk feared to tread, and indecent folk made their living. The fuel gauge showed enough juice for maybe one more jump, and life support was running on reserves. I tried to access the ship's logs, but they'd been wiped cleaner than my memory. Even the backup drives had been professionally scrubbed. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to erase any trace of recent events, which suggested I'd made enemies with both skill and resources. The comm system crackled to life, making me jump like a spooked bronco. A gravelly voice emerged from the speakers, distorted by distance and interference. "Well, well, the Sleeping Beauty awakens." I keyed the transmit button. "Who is this?" My own voice sounded strange to my ears, rougher than I expected. Now that's a fine question, coming from a man who's forgotten his own name. "Tell me, friend, do you remember what you did to earn that bounty on your head?" "I don't remember much of anything," I said, which felt like the truth. "But I'm guessing you're here to collect." Laughter crackled through the static. "Smart man. Name's Craden Vex, and I've been tracking you across 3 systems. You led me quite a chase before that little mishap with the memory wipe." "Memory wipe. So it hadn't been an accident or injury. Someone had deliberately scrubbed my brain. "What's my name?" I asked. "According to the bounty posting, you go by Silas Kane. Ring any bells?" Nothing. The name sat in my mind like a stranger's coat. It might fit, but it didn't feel like mine. What did I do? Killed a man named Marcus Thorne in a cantina on Perdition Station. Shot him down in cold blood, according to witnesses. His family's offering 50,000 credits for your head. I drew the plasma revolver and checked the charge. Full power, 6 shots. And you figure to collect? Oh, I intend to try. But first, I'm curious about something. That gun you're holding, try firing it. The request struck me as odd, but I could see another ship through the cockpit's forward screen. A sleek hunter-killer, painted in Predator's black. Vex had me dead to rights if he wanted to take the shot. I aimed the pistol at an empty bulkhead and squeezed the trigger. Nothing. Not even a click. "Interesting?" Vex's voice carried a note of amusement. "Now try telling me a lie while you pull that trigger." "I remember everything that happened," I said, squeezing the trigger again. This time, the weapon discharged with a brilliant flash, leaving a smoking hole in the bulkhead. My blood turned to ice water. "What the hell?" "Biometric lock, key distress patterns, and brain chemistry. That gun only fires when you're lying, Kane. Someone went to considerable trouble to set that up. Probably the same someone who wiped your memory. Question is, why would anyone want a gun that only works when you're dishonest?" I stared at the weapon in my hand like it was a coiled rattlesnake. "I don't know." "Well, you'd better figure it out fast, because I'm not the only hunter on your trail, and the others won't be interested in conversation." The comm went dead, leaving me alone with questions and a weapon that apparently knew me better than I knew myself. I holstered the gun and tried to think. Someone had wiped my memory, branded a name on my ship, and rigged my sidearm to only fire when I lied. The coordinates below Black Eleanor had to mean something. They were the only clue I had. I fed the numbers into the nav computer and felt my heart sink. The coordinates pointed to a location deep in the broken territories, in a system marked with warnings about pirates, radiation storms, and worse things that didn't have names. It would take most of my remaining fuel to get there, and if it turned out to be a trap, I'd be stranded. But what choice did I have? The alternative was drifting here, until Vex or someone like him decided to collect that bounty, and something told me I wouldn't survive the experience. I fired up the engines and felt the ship shudder into hyperspace, leaving Vex and his questions behind. The jump would take 6 hours, giving me time to search the ship more thoroughly. Maybe I'd missed something that could explain who I was and why someone wanted me to forget. The cargo hold yielded nothing but empty crates, and the lingering smell of ozone from whatever fight had taken place there. My quarters were spartanly furnished. A narrow bunk, a small desk, and a locker containing clothes that fit me perfectly, but felt like they belonged to someone else. No personal effects, no photographs, no mementos of a life I couldn't remember. But in the desk drawer, hidden beneath a false bottom, I found a data chip marked with the same burning technique as the hull inscription. My hands shook as I inserted it into the ship's computer, and a holographic image flickered to life. The woman was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. Sharp cheekbones, eyes like winter stars, and hair black as the space between worlds. She wore the kind of clothes that suggested money and power, but her smile carried the warmth of summer rain. If you're watching this, Silas, then everything went according to plan. Her voice was honey over steel. My name is Eleanor Blackwood, though most folks in the territories know me as Black Eleanor. And if your memory's been wiped, then it means you kept your promise. The image paused, and I realized I was holding my breath. You came to me 3 days ago with an interesting proposition. Said you'd killed a man named Marcus Thorne, but that there was more to the story than the bounty hunters knew. You offered to help me with a problem I've been having with Thorne's associates, but only if I agreed to wipe your memory afterward and give you a fresh start. I leaned closer to the projection. What kind of problem? As if she could hear me, Eleanor continued. Thorne and his crew have been running slaves through my territory, using my name to legitimize their operation. They've got a processing station hidden in the Maelstrom Nebula, and they're using it to break people before selling them to the mining companies on the rim. I want it stopped, but I can't move against them directly without starting a war that would hurt innocent people. The image flickered, and when it stabilized, Eleanor's expression had hardened. You suggested a different approach. Said you'd infiltrate their operation, gather evidence, and then signal me when to strike. But you insisted on the memory wipe afterward. Said you'd done too many dark things in your life, and you wanted a chance to be someone better. The projection began to fade. The coordinates will take you to my stronghold on Sanctuary. Come alone, and come ready for a fight. Because whatever you find there, it won't be what you expect. The image died, leaving me staring at empty air and wrestling with implications I didn't like. If Eleanor was telling the truth, then I wasn't just a cold-blooded killer. I was someone trying to make amends for past sins. But the gun at my hip suggested I was also someone who'd learned to lie so well that truth had become the exception rather than the rule. The nav computer chimed, announcing our arrival at the coordinates. Through the cockpit screen, I could see a small moon orbiting a dead star, its surface scarred by ancient impacts and more recent construction. Docking bays and defensive installations dotted the landscape like metal tumors, and ships of various sizes moved in carefully orchestrated patterns around the facility. This was Sanctuary, Black Eleanor's stronghold, and it looked like exactly the kind of place where dangerous people went to make dangerous deals. I brought the ship in on the designated approach vector, noting the targeting sensors that tracked my movement, and the weapon emplacements that could turn me into scrap metal if I made the wrong move. The docking bay I was assigned was large enough for a ship twice my size, and as the airlock cycled, I could see armed guards waiting on the other side. The woman who greeted me was older than her holographic image suggested, with lines around her eyes that spoke of hard decisions and harder consequences. But her smile was genuine as she extended a hand. "Welcome to Sanctuary, Silas. I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure I had a choice," I replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, calloused from years of handling weapons and making her own way in an unforgiving universe. "There's always a choice. That's what you told me when you first walked into my office 3 days ago. Said you were tired of being the kind of man who didn't have choices." She led me through corridors lined with blast doors and defensive positions. This wasn't just a criminal hideout. It was a fortress designed to withstand siege warfare. "How many people live here?" About 3,000, give or take. Refugees, mostly from the slave operations and corporate mining camps. People who needed a place to start over, just like you. We entered a large chamber that served as both office and command center. Holographic displays showed ship movements throughout the system, and communication stations buzzed with coded transmissions. Eleanor settled behind a desk made from what looked like the hull plating of a destroyed warship. "Before we go any further, I need to know something," she said. "Do you remember why you wanted your memory wiped? I tried to reach back into the darkness where my past should be, but found only shadows and the taste of regret." "No, but I get the feeling it wasn't because I was a good man." "You weren't, but you weren't evil either, just lost. You'd spent so many years being what other people needed you to be that you'd forgotten who you actually were. The memory wipe was supposed to give you a chance to find out." She activated a holographic display, showing a star chart of the local systems. "But first, we have a job to finish. Thorne's processing station is here, in the heart of the Maelstrom Nebula. It's heavily defended, and they've got at least 200 slaves being held there. Your job was to get inside and disable their defenses so my people could stage a rescue. And how was I supposed to do that?" Eleanor's smile turned predatory. "By telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. You see, Silas, that gun of yours isn't the only thing that responds to lies. Thorne's people have been looking for Black Eleanor for months, trying to find this place so they can eliminate the threat to their operation. You were going to tell them you'd found me." The pieces began to fall into place. But if I could only fire when I was lying. Then you'd be completely defenseless when you told them the truth. It was a hell of a risk, but you said you were tired of taking the safe path. She leaned forward. "The question is, are you still willing to take that risk, even without your memories of why it matters?" I thought about the empty spaces in my head, the gun that knew my secrets better than I did, and the woman across from me who'd trusted a stranger with the lives of her people. Maybe I couldn't remember who I'd been, but I could choose who I wanted to be. "Tell me what you need me to do." The plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. I would take my ship to the processing station and claim to be a bounty hunter who'd captured Black Eleanor's location. The biometric scanners at the facility would read my stress levels and brain chemistry, confirming that I was telling the truth when I said I'd found her stronghold. They'd let me inside to collect my reward, at which point I'd disable the station's shields and weapons so Eleanor's rescue fleet could move in. The only problem was that I'd have to actually believe I was betraying her for the deception to work. The memory wipe should help with that, Eleanor explained as we walked back to my ship. Your conscious mind knows you're working with me, but your subconscious will be processing the situation as a genuine betrayal. The stress patterns should be convincing enough to fool their scanners. And if they're not, then you'll die, and 200 innocent people will remain slaves until I can find another way to reach them. I stopped walking. That's a hell of a thing to lay on someone who doesn't even remember his own name. You're right. But 3 days ago, you told me that remembering your name wasn't as important as remembering what it meant to do the right thing. She touched my arm gently. I can't make this choice for you, Silas, but I can tell you that the man who sat in my office and volunteered for this mission believed it was worth the risk. I looked at my ship then at the woman who claimed to know me better than I knew myself. The smart play would be to walk away, find some quiet corner of the galaxy, and build a new life from scratch. But something deep in my chest, maybe conscience, maybe just stubbornness, wouldn't let me abandon those slaves to their fate. How long do I have? The processing ship leaves the station in 18 hours. After that, those people disappear into the mining camps, and we'll never see them again. I climbed into my ship and fired up the engines. Through the cockpit screen, I could see Eleanor watching from the docking bay, her expression unreadable. Whatever history we'd shared was locked away behind the wall of my missing memories, but I found myself hoping we'd have a chance to build new ones. The journey to the Maelstrom Nebula took 12 hours, and I spent most of it trying to convince myself that I was actually planning to betray Eleanor. It wasn't easy. Every instinct I had told me she was someone worth trusting, someone worth protecting. But as we approached the nebula's swirling clouds of ionized gas and electromagnetic interference, I felt my stress levels rising and my hands beginning to shake. Maybe the deception would work after all. The processing station was a massive structure, built into the hull of a derelict battleship, bristling with weapons and surrounded by a defensive grid that could vaporize anything smaller than a cruiser. My comm system crackled with challenge codes and authorization requests, and I found myself sweating as I responded with the identification Eleanor had provided. "State your business," came the reply. "Bounty hunter," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I've got information about Black Eleanor's location. Worth 50,000 credits to the right buyer." There was a long pause, then, "Proceed to docking bay 7. You'll be met by security." The bay was smaller than Eleanor's, and the guards waiting for me looked like the kind of people who enjoyed their work a little too much. They escorted me through corridors that reeked of fear and desperation, past cells filled with hollow-eyed prisoners who'd given up hope of rescue. The station commander was a thin man with the pale complexion of someone who'd spent too many years in artificial environments. He studied me with the calculating gaze of a predator, sizing up potential prey. "You claim to know where Black Eleanor is hiding," he said without preamble. "I do." The words felt like ash in my mouth, but I forced myself to continue. "Sanctuary Station, in the Kepler 442 system. She's got about 3,000 people there, including a fleet of armed ships." The commander's eyes narrowed. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "Run a bioscan. Check my stress patterns. I'm risking my life just being here. If Eleanor finds out I betrayed her, she'll hunt me to the ends of the galaxy." The scanner hummed as it analyzed my vital signs, and I held my breath, hoping the combination of genuine fear and false memories would be enough to fool the sensors. After what felt like an eternity, the commander nodded. "The readings are consistent with truthfulness. Very well, 50,000 credits, as agreed." He gestured to one of his guards, who produced a credit chip. As I reached for it, I noticed the man's sidearm. A plasma rifle with modifications I recognized. It was the same type of weapon that had left blast marks in my ship's pilot chair. "One more thing," the commander said as I pocketed the chip. "We're moving the current batch of cargo in 6 hours. I'd like you to stick around. Make sure there are no complications." It wasn't a request. I nodded, trying to look like a man who'd just sold his soul for money. "Whatever you need, They gave me quarters near the command center, with a view of the processing bays where the slaves were being prepared for transport. The sight made my stomach turn. Men, women, and children reduced to inventory numbers, their spirits broken by weeks or months of captivity. I waited until the guard rotation changed, then slipped out of my room and made my way to the station's shield generator. The corridors were dimly lit and poorly monitored. Whoever had designed this place had been more concerned with keeping people in than keeping intruders out. The generator room was protected by a simple electronic lock that yielded to the bypass codes Eleanor had given me. Inside, banks of fusion reactors fed power to the defensive systems that kept the station safe from attack. I found the primary control console and began entering the shutdown sequence. I was wondering when you'd make your move. I spun around to find the commander standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards with weapons drawn. In his hand was a scanner showing my biometric readings from the past hour. Stress levels dropping, heart rate stabilizing, brain chemistry consistent with relief rather than fear, he said with a cold smile. You're not a bounty hunter at all, are you? You're one of Eleanor's people sent here to sabotage my operation. I raised my hand slowly, mind racing. The shutdown sequence was only half complete. If I could buy a few more minutes, Eleanor's fleet would have a chance. You're right. I'm working for her. I know. The question is, why did you think this would work? Because I believed it would, I said, and realized it was true. Some part of me had genuinely expected to betray Eleanor, had been prepared to take the money and run. The memory wipe had created a fracture in my personality, leaving me uncertain of my own motivations. The commander raised his weapon. Well, your belief was misplaced. Kill him. I drew my own gun, knowing it wouldn't fire, knowing I was about to die for people I couldn't remember caring about. But as the guards' fingers tightened on their triggers, I heard myself say, Eleanor's already dead. I killed her myself before coming here. The lie came out smooth as silk, and my gun discharged with brilliant fury. The first guard went down, then the second, their weapons clattering across the deck plating. The commander stared at me in shock, his own weapon forgotten. How? Special modification, I said, advancing on him. Gun only fires when I'm lying. Makes it real useful in situations like this. I could have killed him then, but something held me back. Instead, I stunned him with a low-power blast and turned back to the control console. The shutdown sequence completed, just as alarms began wailing throughout the station. Through the viewports, I could see Eleanor's ships emerging from the nebula's concealing clouds, their weapons already charging for the attack. The station's guns tried to respond, but without shields or targeting systems, they were sitting ducks. The battle was over in minutes. Eleanor's people moved through the station like a precision instrument, freeing the slaves and securing the facility. I found myself in the command center, watching the rescue operations, and trying to understand what I was feeling. Regret. Eleanor's voice came from behind me. I'm not sure. Maybe relief. I turned to face her. I remembered something during the fight. Not much, just a flash. A woman and child in one of those cells, looking at me like I was their last hope. Your sister and her daughter, Eleanor said quietly. They were taken in a raid 6 months ago. You spent everything you had trying to find them, following leads across half the galaxy. When you finally tracked them here, they were already gone, sold to a mining operation in the Outer Rim. The words hit me like a physical blow. Did I find them? No, But you found something else, a purpose. You realized that as long as places like this existed, other families would suffer the same loss. She moved to stand beside me at the viewport. That's when you came to me with your plan. I watched as the last of the slaves were evacuated to Eleanor's ships, their faces showing the first glimmers of hope they'd felt in months. And the memory wipe. You said you'd done too many dark things in pursuit of revenge. You wanted to forget the man you'd been and try to become someone better. She smiled sadly. I tried to talk you out of it, but you were determined. Do you think it worked? I think you're asking the wrong question. The man who volunteered for this mission was trying to escape his past. The man who completed it chose to embrace his future. She touched my arm gently. The question isn't whether you're different. It's whether you're ready to find out who you really are. I looked at the gun in my hand, then at the woman who'd trusted me with the lives of her people. Maybe I couldn't remember my past, but I could see my future stretching out before me like an uncharted star map, full of possibilities and choices yet to be made. I think I'd like to find out, I said, and for the first time since waking up on my ship, the words felt completely true. Eleanor smiled, and in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I belonged.